All right, you endocrine maniacs, looking at the third and final part of the endocrine system. Hopefully by now we've covered the basics, we've covered the pituitary, we've covered the thyroid, the parathyroid, and I believe the adrenal glands. If I'm missing one, you can look back up and find it in the other notes. Today we're going to knock out the rest of them. It's going to feel like we're flying through them a little bit. Don't want to feel that way, just kind of want to touch base on every one of them. The first organ we're going to look at in the endocrine system is one that we've looked at a little bit before, the pancreas. Just making sure I had it in order. The pancreas is located on the back side of the stomach, so right behind it. It's a fish-shaped organ is what you hear a lot of times. I mean, I guess I could see it. Kind of like a tail here, and or a head here, and it tapers off that way. It is located in the upper left, of course that's on the models, of the abdominal cavity. See, it's kind of tucked in behind the stomach here, in the liver, part of the liver. It's got two functions. This is where you've heard of it before. It's an exocrine gland and an endocrine gland. Exocrine is the portion it does there is where it secretes digestive juices into the intestines. Okay, so it excretes it there and goes in the intestines. That, of course, helps break down some fats that enters into the small intestines there, and it breaks those down to be digested. The endocrine gland portion of it, it releases hormones right into the bloodstream. Okay, right into the bloodstream. And one of the most commonly known hormones, insulin. Okay, so the pancreas has huge jobs to play, big roles to fill. One with the digestive system and then also with the endocrine system. Before we get into insulin, there's a couple different hormones that are all important that are produced by the pancreas. Glucagon, it stimulates the liver to break down glycogen. This is a stored form of glucose. In other words, it's what causes the liver to start breaking down these simple sugars that are stored into a form that's usable. Okay, so glucose is a simple sugar our body uses all the time for all the nutrients, all the energy that we need. And so pancreas starts that process rolling. It also produces insulin. Okay, and insulin is majorly important. Okay, it stimulates the liver to do the same as well. It does the same thing as glucagon, but it also promotes facilitated diffusion across cell membranes. Now, what does that mean? You probably need to go back and think about biology, and it helps things pass into the cell, namely proteins or sugars and carbohydrates. It allows them to pass. This facilitates that diffusion of these larger molecules across the cell membrane into the cells, and then the cells are able to use those things. If they don't get across the cell membrane through facilitated diffusion, chances are great they're not getting in there. It also acts as a key that allows glucose into the cell. That's kind of the summation of what this last one is. It allows glucose or these simple sugars into the cell, especially cardiac and skeletal muscles. All right, especially cardiac and skeletal muscles, like I just said. Nerve cells are interesting. They don't require insulin for the intake of glucose. However, they are affected by changes in blood glucose or how much sugar is found in the blood. So yeah, they don't need insulin like some of the other things we talk about. These cells that are opening up to allow carbohydrates or sugars in, but they are affected by this blood glucose level. Now, what is glucose? I keep throwing it around. It's the main energy source for the body. Most of what we eat is broken down into other things that then are broken down into glucose. Okay, it is absorbed directly into the bloodstream after eating. That's when it pulls out these nutrients in the small intestine. It enters in the bloodstream, and that's what it is. Glucose is entering into it. The problem with that is it can't get into the cells of most tissues, namely muscles, without insulin. Insulin helps, like I said, facilitate diffusion, open up these cells so that this glucose can enter in. All right, so that's the big distinction. That's what insulin does. We got glucose no matter what after we eat, as long as our digestive system is doing its job. And we've got glucose. The problem is unlocking the cells to let it in. Okay, so hypoglycemia. Remember, hypo is low or under. This is low blood sugar. This can be a result of fasting, so not getting enough to eat. right? You're not having enough glucose inside your blood from not getting it, or this could be an overproduction of insulin. It is opening up the cells wide. It's allowing all that glucose to enter in and leaving not enough sugar inside your blood. Okay. Now, this is not a disease. Hypoglycemia is not a disease, but it can be an indicator of a health problem. Somebody with hypoglycemia, I didn't get into it, might feel faint. They might pass out. They may be lethargic. They may feel like their brain's not really functioning correctly. Okay, it sounds like symptoms from lots of other things, like several of this stuff does with the endocrine system. But hypoglycemia is not a disease in itself, okay, but it is a symptom. When we look at the pancreas, it's important to look at disorders. We've already kind of hinted on some. Diabetes, okay, diabetes, you probably know somebody that's a diabetic. If they have to poke their finger and check their blood sugar level often, that's what a diabetic does. They're checking their blood sugar level. There's two different types, okay, and these are very clear distinctions between the two. One is called type 1 diabetes, okay, and that's sometimes called juvenile diabetes, and that's a fitting term because we see it in juveniles or underage people. This is where the pancreas fails to produce enough insulin, okay, so it's not opening up those cells. This would be hyperglycemia, right? Hyper. It's a higher blood sugar because the cells aren't opening up, leaving the sugar not getting into those cells, leaving the blood sugar much higher than it ought to be. That's why they're pricking their finger and seeing what their sugar level is. Symptoms of this include excessive thirst, hunger, frequent urination, and weight loss. Now, this is usually an autoimmune disorder. We saw that yesterday. It's where our body attacks something that normally shouldn't be attacked. In this case, immune system cells and antibodies attack the cells that produce insulin inside the pancreas. So it's not controlling blood sugar levels that way. And this would require regular injections of insulin. So you'd have artificial insulin, which is a game changer, which really revolutionized a lot of medical, or was a revolution of medical technology. It also saved a lot of people's lives, still does, being able to get these regular injections of insulin. A type 1 diabetic has probably been doing that for a while if they're, older. Type 2 diabetes, also called adult onset diabetes, is rightfully named as well because instead of being juvenile diabetes or when you were younger getting it, this typically is later on in life. Now, a young person, a teenager, let's say, could get adult onset diabetes. All right, they could. This is where the body cells become resistant to insulin. They stop, functioning correctly because they're not opening up, allowing glucose to enter in because they've become resistant to insulin. It's not an autoimmune disorder. It's not anything like that. It typically occurs. Now, this is typically in somebody that's excessively overweight. Or somebody that's diet is a little bit out of control. Symptoms include thirst, just like the other one, frequent urination, just like the other one. But in this one, being overweight is sometimes a result of that. Now, I say all that to say this. You can be in fairly decent shape and get adult onset diabetes. It is much rarer, especially in America. We have an obesity problem. Type 2 diabetes is at an all-time high. Same thing here. Type 2 diabetes, sometimes we'll have to have insulin injections in order to function. So type 1 is juvenile diabetes. Type 2 is adult onset diabetes. Pineal gland, we'll try to look at a video about diabetes. I'll try to find me a good one. The pineal gland, also called the pineal body, it's the size of a pea. It's located in the middle part of the brain. It does do some other things, but one that's worth noting for us that you will come in contact with during your life is it secretes something called melatonin. Melatonin is a hormone that is stimulated by darkness and inhibited or turned off by light. This is what controls our sleep cycle. If you've ever had a parent or a sibling or somebody working like third shift overnight, and they have to kind of change their sleep schedule, based all the rest of us may be going to bed, 10 o'clock at night, waking up at 6 in the morning. They may just be coming home from work and trying to sleep during the day. It's hard to do. It's hard to get that change. And one reason is, besides all the societal factors involved, like, everybody being out and about or phone calls and texts and all that kind of stuff during the day. But one reason is because of the light. Our bodies get used to, our pineal body or our pineal gland gets used to this darkness at a certain time, and typically us going to sleep in it, and then light being awake. And so what begins to happen is it gets used to secreting melatonin as it gets dark. That's why you might get sleepy when the sun goes down. And as seasons change and our change of darkness, our time of darkness changes, you may have a hard time sleeping, or you may have a hard time waking up with these changes. Because a rise in melatonin causes this feeling of sleepiness. If you live somewhere near the poles of the earth, say like Alaska, where it has part of the year it's daylight for 23 of the 24 hours in the day, it's going to mess up your sleep cycle, and that's because it's messing up the secretion of melatonin. Same with the opposite. If it's dark for 23 of the 24 hours, it's going to mess you up. You can't really get a sleep schedule that's consistent. Now, melatonin is also sold as an artificial hormone. It is not really clinically proven to work, I guess you could say. A lot of people give it to their kids if they're having trouble sleeping or getting on a sleep cycle to try to regulate that. Some studies show that it works, some doesn't. I've taken it a time or two, and sometimes it does nothing for insomnia, just letting you know. But some people, it works like a charm. There's liquid versions. There's also a pill version. But that's what it's trying to be like, is this hormone melatonin, hopefully to try to make us be sleepy. The hypothalamus is in the lower central part of the brain. It is simply just a link. I like to think of it as a link between the nervous and the endocrine systems. We've already seen with like the hormone cascades, the hypothalamus is included in there. Pituitary typically causes the hypothalamus to secrete a hormone, which causes something else to stimulate a hormone like the adrenal glands. So the hypothalamus. The thymus is in our chest cavity. This grows during childhood, and after puberty, it typically decreases in size. Now, it doesn't shrink to nothingness. It just decreases in size. This releases a hormone thymosin, which stimulates T cells. T cells, we hadn't really got a chance to cover those, but those are our immunity cells. That's how we gain immunity to certain things. So as our body experiences a sickness, as it's combating this sickness with our white blood cells, these T cells are created. They're like little memories. They're memories inside our bloodstream, also inside the lymphatic system, which we're going to learn about. The thymus is included in that. It remembers, okay, hey, this bacteria we need to fight off. And the moment it comes in contact with it, it automatically starts creating antibodies very, very quickly. Our body, typically, if you have a good immune system, which most of y'all do, we'll start fighting that off without having any real damage. Okay, the bacteria or the virus hadn't had time to set up and cause any damage. The T cells, however, just started fighting it right away because they have almost like a memory, a chemical memory. So the thymus is the development and differentiation of these T cells, these T lymphocytes. Can't talk. And the last slide, we only got a minute, but these are the reproductive glands, also known as the gonads. We've seen these with the reproductive system. Males, we got our testicles, our testes. Besides producing sperm, they also secrete testosterone, and testosterone regulates the development of secondary sex characteristics, the deepening of the voice, facial hair, all of that, etc., etc. And if you're a guy, you've been through it, you understand it. Females, the ovaries, besides producing eggs through ovulation, secrete a hormone called estrogen, and estrogen regulates the development of secondary sex characteristics, just like with the guys there with testosterone, including enlargement of the breast, broadening of the pelvis, and also kickstarting ovulation. So estrogen and the hormone progesterone, as we saw with pregnancy, we mentioned this, but they're both involved in that. Also, they help regulate the menstrual cycle. If estrogen or progesterone levels are off, the menstrual cycle may be less predictable. And that's the end of our notes.